How's it going, everybody? This is Dominic Minchella. I am the Kansas City Chiefs beat writer for On SI and the host of the Kansas City Chiefs Insider Podcast. Thank you guys so much for stopping in today as we continue on dissecting the storylines to watch, positions to watch for the Kansas City Chiefs as they go through their training camp period. As you might remember yesterday, if you didn't see that podcast, be sure you go listen or watch on YouTube or anywhere you find your podcasts. We talked about two breakout candidates to watch throughout training camp that could bleed their success into the 2025 campaign, them being both Jaden Hicks and Isaiah Pacheco. But today, we're going to be talking about the offensive line, and more specifically, the posing question that is and wondering in everyone's mind: is the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line still the biggest issue for the franchise going into the new campaign? As we know, the Kansas City Chiefs spent an enormous amount of time this offseason making sure that they could kind of solidify their offensive line in several ways. Now, they did use their first-round pick to select Josh Simmons out of Ohio State in the 32nd overall pick in the first round. You went out and you signed Jalen Moore to a 2-year deal. You got a bunch of undrafted free agents who could be strongly in the consideration of a depth piece on the roster. You extended Trey Smith to a multi-year deal. You still have Creed Humphrey manning down center. You have competition between Kingsley Suamataia and Mike Caliendo at the left guard position. While Jawan Taylor is injured, he could definitely still be in the running for the right tackle position. There is a lot of moving pieces to watch throughout the offensive line going into this or throughout the remainder of training camp. More specifically, it's going to be a testament of whether they can protect Patrick Mahomes better on the left side against defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo's defensive scheme and see if they can protect Patrick Mahomes. Last season, we knew that going into this offseason that the Kansas City Chiefs, their biggest area of concern was going to be that left tackle position. So much so that they took a chance on a guy who was injured based off of the production that they had seen from his collegiate years beforehand. Now, I'm not here saying that Josh Simmons by any means has no business being the starting left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that if all goes well and if he earns his spot, that's a good pickup, as well as he recovers in his knee injury. I think that that's only going to blossom him and make him play with a kind of a chip on his shoulder for the remainder of training camp. Although I do think that Jalen Moore has a strong chance as well as earning that position. We've seen, as I touched on before, we could have just seen the first offensive line for week one. The lineup, as we saw for the first practice for the Kansas City Chiefs, had Kingsley Suamataia, Josh Simmons, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Jalen Moore around that line. I mean, if you look at that on paper, and they all have high ceilings, they have a handful of them have already proven to be forces in the NFL, while others are kind of developing themselves into whether it's a rookie role like Josh Simmons, whether it's a second-year position player in Kingsley Suamataia, or a guy in Jalen Moore who is looking to be a starter out of spending his few seasons with the San Francisco 49ers as a backup. Now, the question at hand is the offensive line still the biggest issue for the Kansas City Chiefs? That can't be answered until pads are on and they get closer to week one of the season. Right now, training camp is so early that I think that multiple things could happen from now until the first whistle blows in week one in having the Kansas City Chiefs offensive line on the field against the Los Angeles Chargers. But I could beg the question is the running back position more of a concern now for the Kansas City Chiefs than the offensive line was going into the new season. And here's my reasoning why. As we know, and this is all hypothetical down the line. Like I said, it's too early to talk about these things in training camp. As training camp continues to progress, we will be able to kind of dive into that topic. But training camp has shown us the Chiefs are leaning towards Isaiah Pacheco already to be their starting running back, and they should. You've got Kareem Hunt backing him up as a veteran. You got Elijah Mitchell for depth. They got Carson Steele and Brashard Smith, who could both be interchangeable at that position given their skill set, unless they could be fighting for a punt/kick return role down the line. But if anything is repetitive from the 2024 campaign out of Isaiah Pacheco, it could be an issue. Now, I understand that he was injured, but seeing that much of a step back from a guy who played 7 games while he's not being 100% healthy, there was a major step back in those games. You would almost assume that he would be close to like the 500 rushing yards. At least those are my assumptions. I understand that the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't necessarily use their running game, their ground game all that often, given that Patrick Mahomes going into this season, he's spoken about wanting to be more explosive. And that's what people want to see. People want to see more explosive plays on offense, and that's going to come from Patrick Mahomes sending the ball down the field, not handing it off to Isaiah Pacheco. However, those two positions kind of play interchangeably in the success of the offense this season. If the offensive line has a way to protect Patrick Mahomes more than we saw last season, because Mahomes got sacked a career high last season with the offensive line that all the moving pieces that it had, or is the offensive line strong enough to allow a handoff to Isaiah Pacheco? And is Isaiah Pacheco going to be able to move himself into the positive trajectory once again with the Kansas City Chiefs? Now, Pacheco did talk about the fact that he has a goal set for 1,000 rushing yards, and that should be his goal. This is a guy who's fighting for a job for the future, not even just this season. Isaiah Pacheco is on the final leg of his rookie contract. He has to prove that he can be reliable, he can stay healthy, and that could be an issue in the future, because if Isaiah Pacheco doesn't do well this season, if you start to see a decline from Kareem Hunt, if Elijah Mitchell isn't kind of what that depth piece that you were expecting, and if you don't use Brashard Smith all that often, from what we've seen thus far, running back could be a definite issue moving forward. But all of this, yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is hypothetical. It's too early to dissect it. I do want to know your thoughts, though. Do you think the offensive line is still the biggest concern, or do you think it's the running back? And if it's not even the running back position, what other position do you think is the most worrisome for this Kansas City Chiefs team ahead of 2025's campaign? That being said, you can follow me over on X at Dom Minchella. I post and repost every single day. You're not going to want to miss any coverage as we get into the nitty-gritty of training camp. We've got a bunch of coverage coming your way. You can also follow us at KC Chiefs on SI on Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X. All of our coverage will be there. You're not going to want to miss it. Kansas City Chiefs on SI is your place to get your Kansas City Chiefs news. That being said, ladies and gentlemen, here's to another day of training camp. I'm Dominic Minchella. As always, be kind to one another, and I'll see you tomorrow.